The Boys was, at one point, one of my favorite shows ever, easily in the top 15 at least, and I've watched a lot of TV shows. For those who haven't watched it, it's set in a world not unlike our own, except superheroes are real and they're treated more like celebrities than your standard Superman or Batman. They're owned by a company called Vought, and are treated much more as things than they are as people. They are used for sponsorships, ads, TV shows, movies, toys, and posters. When it first came out, the writing was amazing. There wasn't a single weak performance, and it covered the superhero genre in a way that I had personally never seen before. However, over time, it slowly deteriorated into a messy, gross, and pointless slog into mediocrity as it embraced shock value over meaningful storytelling. That being said, I'm actually not going to be covering the downfall of the show, and instead, I wanted to take a trip down memory lane and talk about just how amazing that first season was. I think The Boys came out at kind of the perfect time. We were all reeling from Avengers Endgame at a time where the superhero obsession had arguably peaked, and it presented a truly unique take on the subgenre of superhero criticism. It was by no means the first time that a piece of media criticized superheroes, but I think it is definitely one of the best. It was able to perfectly adapt to the original comics for the modern era, expanding upon the themes of greed, corporate corruption, celebrity, idolization, and the cost of power to fit into a contemporary mold, turning superheroes into attention-seeking celebrities. It's genius. No matter how much the quality of the show dipped over time, it always strived to explore the very worst aspects of capitalism, in turn shining a light on the grotesque history of America. From team meetings about popularity scores to perpetual merchandising, every single centimeter of this world is tainted with self-serving corporate designs. This season in particular really put the criticism of celebrity in the spotlight to show that every part of the superhero life is corrupt to its very core. I also just love that the threats to these supes, for the most part at least, aren't necessarily physical but social. They are so terrified of losing the love and attention they get that they're willing to do anything to keep the social status and power that they've gained. It's why the threat of Compound V's leak to the public, or the resurgence of the truth about the plane crash, are such immense threats to the Seven. They care only about themselves and how they're perceived, and using them as an allegory for celebrity idolization and the reality of fame and fortune is so smart. This message is demonstrated predominantly through its excellently written characters and the actors who portrayed them. Homelander might just be one of the best TV villains ever written, and it goes without saying that Anthony Starr is cast perfectly in the role. It's funny having finished the show and then going back to the first season, where in the later seasons he loses the threat that he once exuded. Here, he is such a genuinely terrifying person whose psychotic unpredictability makes every scene he's in nail-biting. His twisted relationship with Madeline Stillwell is fascinating, and giving a villain as powerful as Homelander a psychological weakness that's done this well, it's such amazing writing. His mirror image, of course, is Billy Butcher. Although the accent slips quite often, Karl Urban is amazing casting here, and off the bat, he's kind of the perfect foil for Homelander considering how enigmatic and unpredictable he is. He's incredibly charismatic, and he has this lovable prick energy that's really infectious. The depth of his hatred for supes almost surpasses the initial revenge narrative, and becomes something so much more, almost as if he feels anger in his bones, which itself is explored in greater detail in Season 3. Huey, on the other hand, serves as a kind of vicarious vessel for the audience, and it's a great way to be introduced to the setting. What would happen if we took a normal, random guy and plopped him in the middle of this fight against supes? He's also very well played by Jack Quaid, who has a very regular guy look to him. Starlight is a character written to show the audience what it's like on the other side of the aisle. What is life like for a supe in the Seven? What do celebrity status and popularity votes do to those with incredible abilities? But also, can superheroes really exist in this world? Like genuine, hopeful, want to save the world heroes. I don't think Erin Moriarty gets nearly enough credit for how well she played Starlight. She really does amazing here. Small shout out to Queen Maeve here, who shows Annie very early on that not all supes are like Homelander. She somewhat represents what a future, jaded version of Starlight could look like. For Frenchie and Kimiko, I really loved these characters, especially when they were together, which is why I'm sort of bunching them together here. They had this really wholesome kindred spirit connection, and it's bittersweet rewatching the season because they got done so dirty by the writers by the end of the show. MM is such an interesting, almost father figure in the group. He felt like the most mature character in the show for the longest time, and Laz Alonso does an amazing job here. They all have brilliant character introduction scenes, but I think I like MM's the most, showing not only his maturity, but also his OCD, which becomes a major part of his character later on. Lastly, I want to talk about A-Train. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, he has the best character arc in the entire show. He's so well written, and shout out to Jesse T. Usher. I don't think he gets nearly enough love for his performance throughout the whole show. This season shows how awful he is at this point, whilst also showing some cracks in his facade that become much more prominent later on. Obviously, there are a lot more characters that I haven't mentioned here. I just wanted to highlight either the most important ones or at least my favorites, but everyone does an exceptional job. These characters are used to explore every single aspect of this dystopian society, whilst also ensuring that it doesn't stray too far away from mirroring what we see on a daily basis in our world. The early days of the show really struck the balance between seriousness and silliness actually quite well. It showed what superhero celebrities would actually be like in the real world. And I know that's something that so many franchises have tried to emulate, some more successfully than others. And although The Boys takes a more extreme approach to the subject, there still felt like there was an authenticity to its approach. It never felt so extreme or so ridiculous that it crossed the threshold of believability, at least not at this point in the series. It also felt so much more tense than in any subsequent season. It felt like the boys were in the most danger here, and I get that not every single season can have the same kind of stakes and danger, but as the show went on, this kind of fell to the wayside. For example, the iconic Translucent episode called Cherry. It was so stressful watching them try to find a way to kill a soup whilst avoiding Homelander's detection, and then they fire the bullet at him, and it not only ricochets but also tears a hole in the protective barrier, but they don't notice, so now we as an audience are stressed as hell. And then there's the scene with Homelander and the van, and the whole time Huey is going through this internal hell of figuring out if he's even capable of killing someone, even if they are a soup. Just the entire episode is so well constructed. It's one of my favorite episodes in the whole show. For me personally, the stakes were never higher than when they were a bunch of regular people taking on beings who were so much more powerful than them. There was an excitement and stress that underlined the season. But even with all of this tension, the show actually used to be funny. Not necessarily laugh out loud crying funny, but just humorous moments that got us to connect with the characters more. There's the Matrix joke from the pilot episode and also the Spice Girls reference later on. Sure, most of the jokes come from Billy, but Huey also having a lot of fish out of water moments added to the comedy for sure. I think the humor was really needed considering just how bleak most of the season really was. The violence also felt meaningful. There were moments of gore and scenes that existed almost solely for the shock value, certainly. But honestly, the most jaw-dropping moments were those that showed little, if any, violence. The plane crash scene is a great example, honestly. There's very little blood and gore, if any, just a plane full of innocent people dying for no reason. Even when violent or gross things were shown, there was a kind of deranged aspect to it that's so rare to see in TV nowadays. Homelander killing the shooter, or Homelander breastfeeding, or Homelander drinking milk from the... You know what? Anytime Homelander did anything, it wasn't just gross or violent, it was just so upsetting to watch. If we as the audience felt uncomfortable by what we were watching, then living in this world must be a living nightmare. Now, I've mentioned a few times that The Boys used to be good, and it got worse at some point. And although I don't want to linger on this point for too long, I do think I should clarify. After season 1, the show slowly got worse. Seasons 2 and 3 are still really good. They're well worth watching in my opinion. They just don't quite reach the heights of the first. Seasons 4 and 5 though, are truly disappointing. I dislike season 4 slightly more, but both seasons completely lose the plot. Everything that made the show unique and meaningful is sacrificed for grotesque shock value and egregious plot holes. The characters are worse written, there's no more subtlety in the storytelling or messaging, things start happening too quickly and too suddenly for there to be any meaning behind them, major plot points end almost as quickly as they begin. I'll give an example whilst avoiding spoilers as much as possible, but season 4 ends on a cliffhanger that seems like it'll have far-reaching implications, only for it to be resolved within the first 2 episodes of the 5th season. There's a minor consequence to this cliffhanger that has very little impact on the main story, if any. It's basically business as usual by the end of the 2nd episode. There are some creative ideas here and there, but for the most part it becomes a bland mess that serves only to put characters and plot points in the right place to set up their desired finale. But that's all I'll say about the rest of the show. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge why I think the first season is amazing, especially compared to what comes after. What this opening season nailed the most though was the humanity. These are people trapped or corrupted by a system that's been in place long before they were even born. They've been manipulated and traumatized for profit, and there's this hopelessness that feels so oppressive. But it goes out of its way to show that normal people can make a difference. Fighting back is worth it because maybe not tomorrow, maybe not a month from now, maybe not years from now, but at some point, what normal people do today can and will create a better future. So do yourself a favor and rewatch The Boys Season 1. I promise you it's worth it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.